Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a short first impression of what's called KeyForge, Call of the Archons. This is from Richard Garfield and Fantasy Flight Games. It is a new, unique game. Not quite an LCG, not quite a CCG, but something quite in between.
Yeah, and it's quite unique. They coined that phrase because every deck you're going to have in this game is completely, well, unique anyway.
Yes. Not
completely different. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of similar cards, but the decks you get in this thing are your own for sure.
Absolutely. So at the Fantasy Flight in-flight report this year, media and a variety of the ticketed event goers got decks for the game. Now, there's also going to be a starter deck, but what we're going to be showing you today is just a deck composition of what comes inside of here and kind of how the game plays, but we're not giving you an overview of the entire game because we don't have it yet.
Yeah, and we've had a chance to play this a few times now, and we're just wrapping our heads around this thing. There's a lot, like a lot of card games, there's a lot of vocabulary to learn, there's a lot of situational
traits and
gameplays that you have to learn. So we've been getting through it. There's rules online. We've got a few games under our belt, and it is definitely a unique game.
So we're not using all the components from the game. Obviously, this just came with cards. These are just tokens. The base starter set will come with all the normal tokens. So the idea behind the game is that each of us are playing Archons, and we have a variety of different races on this planet, which is an artificial planet, and we're all competing to unlock these vaults. And in order to unlock the vaults, you have to come up with 3 keys. And to do those, you're going to have to collect embers. 6 embers equals 1 key. So in order to win, you have to collect 18 embers and turn those into the 3 keys. So it's kind of a race to see whoever can do that first.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because the way you build those keys with the ember is you're collecting 6, and the first thing you do on your turn is going to be doing that, if you still have your ember.
Yeah.
Because as you collect it, there's going to be obviously a lot of jockeying back and forth of taking ember, stealing ember, capturing ember. These are some of those words we were talking about.
Before we get into gameplay, let's talk about the unique aspect of the game. So this is the one thing that's really, really cool about the game. When Richard Garfield announced that he wanted to make sure that every single deck was unique. Now, the cards in the game, you're going to have cards that other players have. However, the backs of every single card are going to look unique. And I mean every single deck that's ever made for this game is going to look different on the back. The first thing you're going to notice is you're going to have a particular person that you represent, or the Archon that you represent. In this case, I am playing Lamar, Trader of the Victorious Bridge. On the front side is going to show you all the cards that came in your deck. And on the back, what's going to make it different than every other deck is, number 1, the name is going to be different. Number 2, the color palette and all the different things that make up what your character looks like. The wings, the arms, the symbols on the character.
All sorts of things.
Not only that, but the cards within your deck. Yes, other players may have the Guardian Demon, but if you look in the bottom right-hand side, it's going to say Lamar, Trader of Victorious Bridge on the front of all your cards too. Which I don't know how they printed all these things, but it's pretty incredible to wrap your head around how this is done.
Obviously, technology has caught up with the imagination of Richard Garfield, and they're procedurally generating these things on the fly as they print them, because it's building these decks as well, because they've got to build these decks with some balance, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But these decks are built from all the different cards, and in each deck, you're going to have 3 of the 7 different factions. And again, those are sort of randomly with some, I guess, AI at the printers built together.
Yep. What's going to happen is this is a 37-card deck that we're playing with here. It's completely unique of other players that you're playing against. At the start of the game, you're going to shuffle all your cards up. You're going to take your main faction or your main leader or Archon, set them off to the side, and you're going to determine who is the first player. The first player is going to draw 7 of the cards. Again, they can mulligan just like any LCG or CCG and throw that back in and draw a new hand. The second player is only going to draw 6 cards. That's important because on the first player's turn, they can either just play 1 card from their hand or they can discard 1 card. That's all they can do on their starting turn. Let's talk about the actual game itself, though, and what you're trying to do. So there are 5 different steps on a player's turn. The very first thing that happens, as we alluded to a moment ago, is that you get to forge a key if you have 6 embers. If you do, you simply take one of the tokens that come with the starter kit, flip it over, denoting you have one of your 3 forged keys.
Yeah, and it should be noted, you can only do that once. So if you have a bunch of ember, you can't forge 2 keys at once. You're going to forge 1 key and then move on to step 2. Step 2 is calling your house.
Yeah.
This is where the game really sets itself apart. And in fact, the first time, maybe the second time you play this game, it's going to take some getting used to. So you're going to basically call one of the 7 houses or factions in the game, and that's going to set up the rest of your turn, because if I call House Dis, any card I play, any card I use, any card I even discard has to be from that faction.
Yep, and you're going to look at your main Archon. It's going to tell you the 3 different houses. So you could have 3 of the 7 houses in there. Again, that's really unique. When we get into the review portion, we'll talk about why that's so unique in the game. Once you've determined which house you're going to use, that's going to determine your next round, which is playing, discarding, or activating those particular cards. So, for instance, if I look at my deck, I could say I want to play House Mars, which is my Martians. I could play any actions I want, fight with any of the creatures I want, reap with any of the creatures, discard any of those Mars cards I want, in any order that I so choose. Doing so, there's a variety of different things that happen. Number one, if you discard a card, you just simply throw it to your discard pile. That's obviously going to help you recycle cards through your hand. If you play the action, you simply throw that card into the discard pile and take that action. Now, there's 4 different types of cards within the game, and I've set them all aside here. And the first one is creatures. Creatures are the things that you're going to attack with. When you look at the anatomy of a card, it's going to tell you the faction or the house that it comes from. It's going to tell you the name of that creature, the attack value or the power that it has, the defense value, which could be 0 armor up to whatever armor the card may have. And then across the bottom is going to give you any kind of special ability, plus tell you what type of card that is, in this case, a creature. The next one is upgrades. Upgrades allow you to mostly put things on cards and do things with them.
Yeah, the upgrade, when you play these things, they're going to basically, or typically rather, be attached to one of the creatures that you have in play. You're going to slide this usually underneath the top of that creature, whether it's exhausted or not, and that is attached to that creature until that creature is taken out of play.
The next one is the action cards. I kind of already alluded to what these do. They're a one-time use. You simply use that card, throw it into your discard pile, and take whatever action it has. Some cards, whether it be a creature, a location, or an artifact, whatever it may be, may also have an ember in the upper or left-hand corner. That means you're simply going to collect 1 ember and put it on your side of the table.
Yeah, and so in fact, some of them might even have 2. Obviously, these are balanced out with the powers and the strength of that card. So the last one is the artifacts. These will go into play under the battle line in front of you. They will go in exhausted. These typically have an ongoing ability or something you can trigger, potentially sacrifice the card to enhance the game.
Yeah, something about the creatures that we need to note too. When you bring a creature into play, again, you're naming the house. So in this case, I named Mars. When you bring them in, they come in exhausted, meaning you can't use their ability. If they do have a play action on them, of course, the moment you bring them into play, you can use that ability. Also, you have to put them to the left or the right of your battle line. They cannot be placed in the center unless they have an ability built in that allows them to do so. And that's important because some cards get benefits for adjacency next to them. Then you're allowed to fight or reap with the cards that you have in front of you. And every single card you have has the ability to reap, even if it doesn't have that printed on the card itself. Some give you bonuses if they have reap on them. So if I decide to reap, of course, I can only activate my Mars cards. I have another card here that could be activated from the disc, but I didn't name House Dis. So I can just tap both these cards and say, I'm going to reap with these. Every card gives you 1 of the embers per card that you reap, but you can also choose to attack with them as well.
Yeah, and when you attack, this is going to be straight up simultaneous combat. So if you choose one of your creatures to attack, the first thing you're going to do is choose a target from your opponent. You're going to compare those numbers. You're going to do the damage of your attack value or your power value, which is also your health for that creature, as is the other creature going to do to you. You're going to subtract any armor values on that to net out the points, take the damage, or eliminate the creatures.
And of course, you're always going to look at the card itself to see if it has any special keywords or powers or abilities that trigger certain things within there. At the end of that, you're going to simply ready all of your cards, meaning you unexhaust them, and you're going to draw back up to 6 cards. And then it's the next player's turn.
Yeah, and the cool thing, too, to remember about taking all of those different actions, like we said, you can do those in any order. So you don't have to play your cards out first and then reap and attack. You could attack first and then reap and then play a card and then reap again. There may be combos that are built because of the way the cards work, especially when you take into account the fact that you have to bring your creatures in on the flanks, because it really sets up some interesting play.
Yep. So that's basically the game. You're going to play until one player has forged 3 of the keys using the embers at the start of their turn to do so. It's a hard stop, and you win the game. as we said, let's get into kind of a pseudo review. Now, obviously, we don't have all the components in front of us. We've only played with 2 of the many thousands of millions of decks that could be printed for this thing. Let's talk about the cons first, because there's a lot of pros to talk about here, but there are some cons to talk about as well. The most obvious, and the one that's probably been talked about most online, is the balancing issue. A lot of CCG games and even LCG games, people like to craft the decks they have. In doing so, they've created balance within their decks. Having all these cards pre-printed and pre-assembled, you don't really know what you're going to get. And we've seen some of that already, just a little bit in the fact that we've played with these 2 decks, and one deck has beat the other one more times than the other one. One of them has more creatures than the other one. And the other thing is, one of the cards that I have in one of my decks keys off of artifacts. It has a very powerful ability, but I only have 1 artifact in the deck. So for those 2 to marry up out of 37 cards is going to be very difficult to do so. If you're crafting and making your own deck, you can do that pretty much to your ability, depending upon how you build your deck. You can't do that in this game.
Yeah, and it should be noted when we talk about balance, obviously, if you, like Jeremy said, if you're building your deck, you're going to put, if you had a card like that that triggers off of artifacts, you're probably going to put more artifacts in your deck. That doesn't necessarily mean this isn't balanced. Like we said, we haven't played this significantly. So that one card that keys off the artifact might be so powerful that they don't want a bunch of artifacts in the deck because that may unbalance the deck. We honestly don't know, but it does bring into, in our plays with these decks, there is a deck that is won more often than the other, and in the rules themselves, they do talk about something they refer to as chains. And these are things that can happen in the game. Some cards actually will give you a chain, but what a chain is it is kind of a handicap.
Yeah.
So it's going to have you drawing 1 less card at the end of your turn if you take a chain. So if you play a really powerful card, it might say take a 2 chain. And then you can dig yourself out from that chain, but they also suggest the chains can be used
As a handicap.
As a handicap before the game even begins. So if 2 friends have played with 2 decks or many, many times and they realize, you know what, this one seems a little stronger, I'll start with a 3 or 4 chain. And that's great.
Yeah.
But it's a little unique in that they're asking the community to
put the handicap on the game.
Figure that out themselves.
I mean, no one's going to know how hardcore LCG and CCG players are going to take to that. Are they really going to want to throw a chain in? Are they even going to want to deal with that? And to be quite honest, are they really going to be playing the same decks against each other all the time, or just go buy a new deck for $10 and try that out, which I think is the allure of the game. So we'll get into that for me is the con. Do you have any other cons?
No, that's the only one really, because I think my pros outweigh the cons for me in particular. I think Jeremy and I come at this game from very different perspectives.
Yeah, I am a hardcore, or I was at one point a hardcore LCG and CCG player, played numerous of them over the years, so I do like crafting decks. I do like building those decks. I like having those things that are unique to me, but also it does, and this kind of goes into the pro, this is approachable from just about everyone.
Yeah.
Like if you get into like Magic the Gathering, which is what Richard originally created, or any other LCG or CCG, it usually gears toward the people that have the most money, or the people who have the most time to craft those decks. So people like us who have active careers and families, we don't have time to go and get online and find the best decks, which ones are winning tournaments, and this allows you to jump right in and have fun with the game, because the game itself is really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, this is more of a pick up and play. And just to communicate that contrast between me and Jeremy a little bit more, that's his background. My background is the very few times I've played Magic, I've played with pre-built decks from starter packs that come with 2 different decks. So not too dissimilar from this in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of the experience I'd like. And so I appreciate when I'm sitting down to play this, I'll know when I play KeyForge, I'm playing against someone who is coming to the table with a pre-built deck just like I'm coming to the table with. So it really comes down to their experience with their deck, my experience with my deck, and the practice I've had with it.
Yeah, it creates a very level playing field. One of the things I love about the game is the fact that you are picking one faction to interact with every single round. And that's very unique, not just because you're activating those things, but also stifles your hand. It stifles your ability to draw cards or discard cards. It stifles your ability to play actions that may not be the house that you choose. And that's really unique, and you don't really appreciate that until you get into the game and you've played it a couple times. You're like, now I start to understand how this all works, and the true beauty behind the system.
And the cool thing about that too, and we didn't even mention this, and you're probably sitting there assuming, well, what are the costs of these cards that you're playing? There are none.
Yeah.
The cost is effectively, I think, replaced with calling your house.
Yeah.
So it makes it more challenging. So for instance, I might have a big row in the battle line of Martians, but my hand is completely filled with Dis faction. If I want any of these cards out, I can't call Martian.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a turn where my Martians just sit there and do not attack to get some of these cards out, or vice versa. So it basically puts that sort of delay and lag in where you'd typically be gathering resources in order to pay for costs, and does it a little bit differently. It makes you really think a lot differently. I really like that aspect of the game.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The other thing I'll mention as a pro is the uniqueness of the game.
Yeah.
It's both a pro and a con because, as I said earlier, the balancing issue may exist. We haven't played enough to know. But the unique aspect not only could lend itself really well in this game, but I'm thinking outside of what else can they do with this unique game label that they have. This can be used in a variety of different aspects, and it's fascinating that they're even able to do this type of printing. I mean, I've worked in the printing atmosphere before, and I know what it takes to ink up a press and to do pre-flight and all these things. This is remarkable technology that they have behind this, and it's very interesting to see not only where this game can go, but where future games that use that same style of printing.
For sure. I'd say some of the other pros I have, unrelated to that, but related to what they're putting on these cards, is the art is amazing.
Very Hearthstone-y.
It's very Hearthstone. This is not only in gameplay to some degree.
Yeah.
I played this with my son, who's played Hearthstone quite a bit. And while not exactly like that, he definitely felt that it had a bit more of a Hearthstone vibe than, say, a Magic the Gathering vibe. And the artwork itself also is very reminiscent of what you'd see from Blizzard and Riot and some of the video game companies out there.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how people enjoy this game or not enjoy this game, where it's going to go over the next couple of years. But what we see so far is very promising within the game. If you guys have any questions, make them in the comments below. We'll answer them to the best of our ability. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.